Hello and welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast week in mobile games, where we discuss the week's news and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz. With me today are deputy editor Paige Cook and news editor Aaron Astle. And again, we're all on video, so that's already awesome.
It's really weird. I don't know. It's like 'cause I didn't do it last week, so it's just strange.
And you've got really awesome background as well.
The funny thing is about my background is technically behind me, that's my desk. That's where I work. So it's because I'm using the laptop at the moment because we wanted to do video. So technically I'm sat using my partner's desk. So when we're the other way around, so that's my background, all the gaming stuff, like got my steelbook cases. This wall, which is what you would usually see, is full of unicorns and princesses. So, not my vibe at all. So, this room is just split between two polar opposite personalities.
I love that. It's just, right down the middle.
Literally,
Just
one side is rainbows and pink, and the other side is video games and Agent 47 over there. There's a little Kratos somewhere in the background. There's just things everywhere.
Aaron, you've changed backgrounds.
Yes, very, very slightly. We've got a different Pokemon in the back this week. I might have to make that a regular thing for the viewers to keep an eye out for.
Spot the difference every week.
Yeah.
And for our audio only listeners, my background is absolutely nothing going on as usual. I guess I'm podcasting live from Helsinki. I've been at Pocket Gamer Connects this week and Finnish Games Week. I'll actually be heading back to We Love Games, or W Love Games, just after this recording. But yeah, as usual, instead of what looks like an airing cupboard, it's now just a white wall and a lamp. So I guess it's slightly more interesting. But how have you both been? How's your week going?
All good. Very busy. But yeah, it's always weird when the team is split because there's so much going on in two different places. So yeah, obviously all the Helsinki stuff from you, normal stuff on this side from us, news, features, interviews. I actually haven't been playing as many games recently. I've just been too tired, but I am reading a lot. I'm reading a Dragon Age book because the new Dragon Age game comes out, and it's been 10 years. How has it been 10 years since the Dragon Age game? So, yeah, I'm just being a super nerd and reading before the game comes out.
Aaron, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I've been on Zelda quite a bit. New Echoes of Wisdom, which I'm having a lot of fun with, exploring. It's nice to sort of have another 2D Zelda game because it's been quite a long time since there's been a brand new one. Obviously, it's a lot more scaled down than like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but having a good time with it. Very kind of puzzle based, and it's a Zelda game where you play as Zelda. Who thought that would ever happen?
Who would have thought? Finally, after decades of waiting.
My really bad confession is I've never got into a Zelda game, so
Oh no,
that's a bad one. That is very bad.
I think that's the podcast over at that.
I know. I'm going to be kicked off now.
Yeah, I said there was a deadline for this, and actually we're just moving forward. Yeah. Well, I mean, my worst confession that people will definitely judge me for is I have never properly played an Assassin's Creed game.
That's quite bad. I feel like Zelda's worse because it's just the nostalgia factor. But yeah, none of the Assassin's Creed, not even the good ones.
The worst thing is because by pile of shame, I've bought them. and then it just I have to play this open world. I haven't really got around to it.
When you get home, you should have them in your background, so each week you can sort of be like, "Oh yeah, I've never played these games, but
just looking at me you need to play this to actually do your job. You need to play Assassin's Creed."
I've only played Black Flag, but I did enjoy it on the Wii.
At least that was one of the good ones. The older ones are the best ones.
Right, they're a bit before my time.
Okay.
On that note, we're all going to jump into some kind of takeaways from Pocket Gamer Connects, and actually this week we also announced our top 50 mobile game makers, which I will jump into. Firstly, some very quick shout outs. We have a couple of events coming up after we've just done this one. So Pocket Gamer Connects Jordan, November 9th and 10th, link in the description, and Pocket Gamer Connects London returns in January. on the 20th to 21st. So there's a few things coming up for us. So as promised, we're actually going to kick things off kind of like we did for Gamescom, and I can't remember if we were recording back in GDC. I don't know if we'd started then. We'll do things a little bit differently. So we'll do some takeaways to start with, and then we'll do the news run through. It's kind of the opposite way. It's what we usually do. So I guess the first thing I'm going to do is, my PGC takeaways, which I keep saying. So one of the things that I kind of found from this week that was interesting. So for anyone that doesn't know, Finnish Games Week, which is the first time they've run it, Leadership Day by IGGA Finland was on Monday. Pocket Gamer Connects was on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday is W Love Games. So there's kind of plenty of there's something for everyone, I guess. So my actual takeaways were Finns get real, Finland style. So Chris James starts off the conference. It's pretty positive, trying to get a bit of buzz going, and then straight away you get Kupi, the director at Neo Games Finland, who's fantastic. And he just kind of comes on, just very matter of fact. This is how it is, which I actually love about the industry. So he talks about how the last data that they had at Neo Games on the industry showed in 2022, so quite a while ago, that the turnover in the sector was at 3.2 billion euros. I don't know what that is now, but obviously after that period, you then get to 2023 and 2024 when the whole sector has had a very, very tough time. So we're dealing with kind of the fallout of app tracking transparency, inflation, declining consumer purchasing power, reduced financing options, global instability, and increased competition. Those are all kind of factors that Kupi pointed out that have made things very difficult. And as we pointed out previously in our State of Finland article, there's other issues going on as well, like in Helsinki, due to kind of the new government, that there's less or maybe even none government investment options now for local studios. It doesn't mean in kind of bordering cities that's not that's still not the case. I think Astle is trying to do some stuff. There's funding options somewhere, but not in Helsinki anymore, which is actually quite surprising given the impact of the industry and if you think about it, kind of how much tax it actually pays as well. And then there's other factors like new immigration laws. It was a very hot political topic in Finland, and that would actually make things more challenging to bring over senior talent, which in kind of a maybe I'm trying to think what the word is, a mature, saturated kind of talent market in Finland for senior talent. Maybe that makes things more difficult. Although Kupi did point out that now there are more senior developers available, but unfortunately only because of kind of layoffs that we've seen throughout the industry. So there's kind of a lot going on. He was talks about kind of some notable. There've been like closures, obviously. Mentioned those layoffs, and I think Shipyard Games is another one that was one that closed. Lightyear closed in the last few months. So he said that he highlighted a lot of issues, and I think it's slightly different from, again, the vibe at all these events is a bit different. So when earlier in the year I went to Finland, that was kind of the first time I'd heard of Survive to 25. When was that? March, April time. So people starting to get pretty real about, the state of the industry. And by now, and I said this at Gamescom, and here everyone's just very honest, like it's really tough. There are signs that things are growing again. And some of the biggest Finnish studios are even growing themselves. But everyone's kind of, backs against the wall. Some are doing subcontracting just to kind of keep the lights on. And everyone's very real. And goes on to my next takeaway, which is, and it kind of feels like a cliche to say this about Finland, but it's a very close community and generally a very honest one. So Kupi's just kind of opened it by being honest. And what I like is actually about this week is that it's very much an example of, well, Pocket Gamer Connects, we bring that to Helsinki, and the community's always embraces that. And then it was just like, well, why don't we just do? The industry's like, well, why don't we just do more to help the studios? And so the leadership day I mentioned, obviously, kind of for leaders, and they discuss a lot of DEI initiatives, which is great. And then you get to a kind of our event at PGC where it's we try and make it for everyone, but it's kind of a place we do business dealings, discuss trends, etc. Got a big indie pitch, and then you get to kind of W Love Games, and it's very much like even more focused on development and for indies. So they're kind of trying to embrace everyone. As could be noted, the industry's not without its challenges because for juniors it's actually very difficult, and I think some of these events try and embrace that, but it's still very difficult for certain levels of talent in the sector here. Some other quick takeaways, and again, it's what I always mention now: it's direct-to-consumer strategies. I just feel like I hear it all the time. We hosted the purchasing power track. We had another session from AppCharge there. We had speakers from Fastspring, Nexus, Rovio, Aghanim, Stash, Raptor, all talking about it. And then I hosted a panel at the end of day 2 with investors. So investors from Ignicio Capital, Sisu Game Ventures, and Play Ventures. And one of the things that they discuss as kind of something interesting for them to see in developers is those direct-to-consumer strategies. So that is the reasons for that is kind of increasing profitability, and also you're just engaging your communities better, which I guess is more attractive if you're able to do those things. Because as some other speakers noted, very difficult for some studios. It's just very difficult to kind of build a community unless you're like one of the big developers out there. So that was definitely very interesting. And then the last thing, and I'll get into the top 50 in a sec, but it was the Finnish influence in the top 50. I'll go into some of the wider trends, but you've got in the list, spoiler alert, we had Thinkersoft, Metacore, Rovio, and Supercell, of course. And then actually, if you think about the wider influence of Finland, it's still pretty huge. So you've got EA, which owns Track 20. Netflix owns Next Games. Take-Two and Zynga owns Small Giant. MTG owns Snowprint Studios, which makes Warhammer, I think. And SciPlay has a Finnish office. They're all in the top 50. Playtika owns the Best Fiends IP. That was obviously seriously. And Supercell has a major stake in SpaceApe, which is in the list. And then, obviously, Tencent acquired most of Supercell, and they're on the list as well. So, you can kind of see Finnish influence everywhere. So, while, maybe they're not quite, it's a really harsh way to put it, they used to be kind of especially the startup capital of mobile gaming, and maybe Finland's not that anymore. Over the years, to kind of Turkey became a bit of a star, especially during the hyper casual boom. Now they've got some of the top casual game developers like Peak Games, Grand Games, Dream Games, Rollic, to mention a few. But Finland's influence just kind of stays and is very, very much in the mix. Yeah, it forever will be kind of maybe one of the hearts of the mobile games industry, I would say. So I just ranted a lot there. I don't know. I don't know if you saw anything coming out of Finland this week that you found interesting.
Nothing specific. Just that obviously some of the tracks that you covered were, pretty interesting. And obviously I was at Helsinki last year. It's the first time I'd been, and yeah, I think, like I said, I think that kind of summarizes it. Of they're kind of always going to be like a heart of the mobile games industry, but things do change, and maybe they're not. Like I said, whether it's because of government funding or it's the startups, maybe there's not as much of an impact there as there once was. But yeah, there's definitely still a lot of heart left in it.
There's actually, and I put it in my takeaways. There's actually a great LinkedIn post from, and I forget his name. He used to work at Huge Games, Anti, and he just wrote this post about a month ago, which was kind of to my point about how honest the people in the Finnish industry can be, because that's how you kind of move forward. You have to be honest about things, but also perhaps in contradiction to some of my points that I think maybe leaders haven't even been honest with themselves about, certain trends and adapting quick enough to those. So a really interesting piece about the state of the market. I'll link all this in the description, and that's definitely worth checking out for his opinions as well. The other thing I obviously wanted to touch on, which I did just kind of go through a little bit, is obviously said we did the top 50 this week. We've been working on that for a couple months at least. a few meetings, a long time writing those profiles. So it's out in the wild. We hope everyone enjoys it. I'm sure there'll be people that agree with the list, people that disagree with the list. We always welcome feedback for that. So who made number one? Spoiler alert. Who else could it be? Monopoly Go developer Scopely. That game, they were acquired by Savvy Games Group for $4.9 billion. And then that was around the time that they released Monopoly Go. And that has since made, in just over a year, I think 15 months, $3 billion in revenue, which Scopely confirmed. So that acquisition is actually looking pretty good. It probably even looks cheap at this point. So yeah, what a great developer. Like, not just revenue, like that game is just fantastic to play. Some really good social innovations, and then not forgetting that they've got Stumble Guys, again a Finnish made game from Kicker Games. They acquired that. That's had 700 million downloads, 50 million monthly players. So that's doing incredibly well. Lots of really interesting partnerships going on there. They also own Marvel Strike Force, Star Trek Fleet Command, Yahtzee with Buddies. I'd say they're very well worth the number one spot. And then some other trends while I'm here that I kind of noticed as we put the list together. I was quite happy that we spotted Superplay. So Paige, earlier this year, you did an interview with the team, with Elad Drury, and that was very timely because that was kind of the first time it'd been brought to my attention, because I hadn't really thought about that studio. No offense to the team at Superplay, very talented, but for quite a few years. And then you suddenly see, like, wow, they're having a real like spike in revenue growth for Die Streams, which was first released in 2019, was it? And now it's just kind of having its best year ever. And then Domino Dreams is a new game they've released that's come out. It's kind of what the top 50 is all about this year, which is looking at top new games that have come out that have done really well, but also how developers are kind of managing their current games, especially in a tough market. Can they keep them stable? Can they grow them? And Superplay has kind of done both. Release a hit new game and grown an existing one. So yeah, really fantastic. And now obviously they were bought by Playtika for $1.95 billion, which I guess maybe is $2 billion because there's a 50 million earn-out clause on top of that as well. And then there was a few, worth pointing out. There's a few releases in 2023 and 2024. I mentioned some podcasts about a month ago, like kind of surprise hits, because you think how down the market's been, and actually there's been loads of successes. So $1 billion hits that were released in 2023 to 2024. Mention Monopoly Go. You've got Century Games' Whiteout Survival, First Fun's Last War, Hoya versus Honkai Star Rail, and Nexon's Dungeon and Fighter Mobile. I might have missed one, but that's already quite a few. So they all rank very highly in the list. Some other trends. So competition in the merged games category has actually heated up. So I think you kind of take for granted that Metacore, again on the list, with Merge Mansion, is or was the leader. That's now no longer the case. Merge Mansion still does well, but it faces serious competition from Magmatic Games' Travel Town. Magmatic is owned by Moon Active, as well as a company called Microfun. I believe they're based in China. They've got Gossip Harbour and Seaside Escape, which do tremendously well. So actually, they've now, like, that whole market has actually grown quite considerably, and it's not just I was going to say a one game market. I guess you still have Grand Games up there with Merge, kind of pushing that market forward as well originally. But yeah, like, interesting to see that puzzle genre grow and new competition emerge. I'm nearly done. But a couple other things. So I did an article for Deconstructor of Fun last year about, like, I called it the hybrid casual gamble. So hyper casual was dying. We've discussed that topic to death in the industry. So they decided we're going to do hybrid casual, which again is not really a genre. It's just something made up that was based on Habby's Archero from years ago, and kind of just adding an extra kind of layer of progression onto the hyper casual model. And I was very skeptical. I'm like, well, they're just, to be honest, these hyper casual publishers, desperate, they're kind of making up this opportunity. And I thought, like, they'll have to pivot away from that or it won't work. turns out these people are, obviously, as we all know, very much obviously much smarter than me, and so they've actually made it work, right? So completely transformed their businesses. Like Voodoo, I think, is one in particular. They've was there talk about they got up to like 300 million just from their hybrid casual business, and they've done that in just a few years. You've got Say Games, My Perfect Hotel's done it tremendously well. Homer has been doing a lot there. I think Fight for America is one of their games. Quality's pivoted into that space, and a few of those have also kind of pivoted into other areas like social apps, PC console, etc. So actually, it's quite commendable in a way. Obviously, they've got a lot of money to play with to make these changes, but it's still quite commendable that you have to shift your entire business, the way you work, and then the team that you've ultimately built into these kind of new models, ways of doing things, and they've actually, so far at least, seemingly succeeded. I guess we'll learn over the next couple of years just how well that's doing in the long term. But yeah, really fascinating. And then lastly, there were 10 brand new companies on this year's list. So that means not just companies that weren't in last year, 10 companies that have never been in it. That's due to kind of mergers, acquisitions. So technically, Microsoft's in it. First time it's in it, but obviously we really mean Activision Blizzard and King, which have been in it for many, many years. But yeah, it just shows the changing market landscape, kind of innovative new companies and titles coming out, companies that are really, really well, like Superplay with Live Ops, and like the hybrid casual guys just transforming their businesses. So yeah, that's my summation of PGC and the top 50. Apologies for everyone for like the longest rant ever. But yeah, I don't know if Paige, Aaron, you got any thoughts on this year's top 50? Any takeaways you had?
The top 50 is always such a funny one because I feel like obviously, as readers, you just see the final thing. And there is behind the scenes so much umming and ahhing. Like some things are quite clear, like yes, it's pretty sure this one should at least be in the top 10. But things can just be changing so constantly. And I think that is just it is kind of, it does just represent the next year one could have easily been above the other or below the other. Like I said, whether it's for a merger or someone just like happens to get one game and it does amazing, and that one game propels them really far up. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things where it's great to celebrate it, but at the same time, it like behind the scenes, like it can be so hard putting it together because things do well in different ways. So yeah, I think it's just a state of, shows how sort of versatile our industry is. And even, with the last few years, it's been obviously really tough, but like the top 50 just shows that like how many great studios there are out there that are managing to still stick it through these hard times.
Yeah, I noted in the intro it's the top 50 now. To your point about tough times, like I think if you're in the list or not in the list, there's a lot for kind of studios to be proud of. Like really, at the moment, if you can keep the lights on, keep people, as many people as you can employed, and that's a huge success in itself. And so it's definitely not a slight on anyone that doesn't make the list. There's so many talented studios to choose from. We've got 50 slots, so we try and pick the ones that we think kind of reflect as many of the kind of criteria and traits as possible. But yeah, it's really tremendously difficult. But congratulations on everyone that was in it.
And I think, like Paige said, with like the deliberating it all, we had way more than 50 companies to kind of decide who makes the lists. Yeah, I don't think it's quite so clear cut as these are the 50 really good ones, and everyone else, what you're playing at, everyone's doing, really good work. It's just, that's how the list works.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, we have loads of companies that we choose from. Then we have to kind of whittle it down. It was a really interesting process. Yeah, congrats to everyone that's on it, but congrats to really everyone in the industry that keeping going during this tough time. It's super impressive. So I'm going to stop talking because I've talked for about 20 minutes at least. So thank you for anyone that's listening for staying tuned, and Paige now for sticking around. So yeah, Paige, I've kind of missed out on some of this stuff this week, but what's been in the news?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it somewhat brief because you've got places to be and people to meet. But yeah, so this was technically one that was more of a last week thing with Merge Games announcing its closure, but I'm kind of glad it trickled into this week for us because it got a little bit complicated. So they announced a closure on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. It's not X, never will be. So they announced that, and that's after a 15-year run. And then all of a sudden they deleted the post. That was gone, and it was replaced with a second statement of, rather than them wording it of like, oh, it's a closure, they just stated that they would be integrated into Maximum Entertainment, which is like their publishing partner. So yeah, just a little bit of a weird one with a little bit of mixed messaging. Last year, Merge Games, they suffered some layoffs. They had a closure of one of their offices here in the UK as well. So, maybe it was kind of building towards this anyway. But yeah, just the messaging of it and the second statement that they put out, it did kind of clarify the fact that the portfolio of games would still be looked after. So there's not going to be any losses in terms of games, but there was no mention of, like, obviously the team. So the original statement was a closure. The second statement is it's an integration. So are any of the original team still there? Are they not? I feel like reading between the lines, it feels like it was a closure. They took the portfolio, but the teams have gone. But that's speculation. I did reach out to Maximum Entertainment just to see if they wanted to kind of clarify the situation, but haven't heard anything back. I know a couple of months ago there was the whole Humble Games situation that it was a little bit different, but similar in the sense of really strange mixed messaging, and nobody likes layoffs, nobody likes closures, so at the very least I feel like you've got to get these messages clear so what's happened, especially with a company that after 15 years, and it's like, well, are any of those people still working on these things, or is it a closure? So yeah, just a bit of a weird one, really.
Definitely, I think you've just got to, what's the expression? The American way of saying it is just rip the band-aid off, rip the
Yeah.
plaster off, and just be honest. And when you get weird mixed messaging, especially, it's just, I mean, it comes across so much worse. Like the cover
Oh
up is
yeah,
always
definitely.
worse than the action, generally speaking. And so, just be upfront and honest. That makes you more trustworthy and transparent. You know, the entire industry is dealing with really difficult times. Like you've just got to kind of be honest, get through it, and yeah, changing messaging, but just makes it look like, well, like you say, what's happening then? Now I'm just confused. Strange way of doing things.
Yeah, very strange. And like I said, as of now, there's still not really any update on like clarifying that. So yeah, I am going to keep an eye out just in case. But yeah, not great news if all of the team is essentially gone. But other news, you actually mentioned this briefly a minute ago, Craig. So Habby have very quietly launched Arch Hero 2. Just to mention that Habby are also in the top 50. They're in their number 31. So yeah, nice to see someone in our top 50 doing some new stuff. But yeah, obviously the first game was super popular, so you would assume you would have some kind of official announcement that you were soft launching a game, but it doesn't really seem like there was. When I woke up and I sort of was researching it, everything I could see was lots of people being like, this is going to be fake, nobody thought it was legit, and then I think it started to roll out on certain stores. So I think it was Canada. I think maybe their store had it first, and people were like, "Oh, like this is legit." It had like the Habby name there. So yeah, it is a thing. It is legitimate. The first game had over 350 million in player spending, according to App Magic. So yeah, really big game. But yeah, just really quietly soft launching the second one. I know, obviously, I mean, companies have different takes on how they do things like this. So obviously a soft launch, usually, you're just testing the waters type of thing. But I can't help but think of, obviously, like when Squad Busters soft launched. I know that was kind of like, I feel like they had the game ready and they knew it was ready, and the soft launch was more of a way to sort of generate some excitement, get the hype up. They had the whole count of like, oh, how many people can we get pre-registered and stuff. So it's just such a contrast between, how big some soft launches are to also this, which should be big because it's a big name. But yeah, it was kind of like searching the internet and people being like, is this real? Is this not real? So yeah, exciting that it's happening, but strange that it's so quiet, maybe.
I think other than their user acquisition campaigns, I'm sure a massive, Survivor.io as well did very well. Because I don't think Habby has ever made a big shout about like the games. I guess in like more traditional marketing channels, because I guess
Mm.
maybe it just doesn't make sense for a lot of mobile companies to do it that way. I'm excited for this game because it's like I said, it's like it's kind of the original hybrid casual hit, and so interesting that they do a sequel. I haven't actually seen what all the things that are different because I guess usually you'd think that they would just update Archero as is and introduce new features into that. I think it's quite rare to see a 2 attached to a hit title on mobile still. Um, not counting Angry Birds 2, I guess. So yeah, really, really, really interesting one. I'm looking forward to seeing how that does.
Yeah, similar to you, Paige, when I was researching it for the article, like I was just seeing so much saying like, no, this is fake, and then like
Yeah.
people putting like screenshots up, and then people like, no, it's all fake. And then I was looking into it and like found the Google Play listing and like checked, this is the real Habby that's listing it, and it had all their other games. It's like, oh, yeah, pretty sure this is real. But yeah, it's strange there's so little mention of it from them. But apparently, to answer your question, Craig, the one of the differences is you have a new hero this time around. The old one has been corrupted to the dark side, according to the Play Store page.
Sixth storyline, the old hero's now the villain.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's so now you have to release a whole new game, right?
Yeah. But presumably you can still go back to the old one and now, still be a hero over there.
Spoilers, Aaron. That's probably the ending.
Maybe.
The ending of these forever games.
Yeah, it'll be one to keep an eye on, definitely numbers wise. But yeah, I don't know. I guess they must be super confident that it's just not really something they're having to shout from the rooftops. And if people don't even know that it's the legit thing or not, oh well. And then last little bit of news from me. It feels weird doing a Pokemon thing. I feel like I've committed a crime because usually Pokemon is Aaron's remit. But I just thought this one was again, I think all of mine are a bit strange this week. So, Pokemon Unite is going to end its service in Belgium and the Netherlands on the 30th of November 2025. Not this year, next year. Both I and Aaron, we had to look into that. We were like, are we reading this wrong? Like, there was an official release. It said 2025, so that's what we're going with. Maybe they've done that wrong, but their official thing did say that. We both were checking, like,
Yeah,
this
and
seems
it
like a
said it.
lot of notice.
Yeah, but it said it multiple times as well, so it's not a typo.
Yeah. So if it is a mistake, you've made the mistake multiple times. So yeah, lots of notice, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Well over a year away, but it didn't really give any indication as to why this is happening. Obviously, the Netherlands and Belgium, they do have more strict regulations when it comes to things like loot boxes and any kind of mechanics that resemble anything like gambling. So, is it them trying to get ahead of any sort of regulations there that they don't want to deal with? The markets there for them aren't obviously like their top markets or even close to it. So maybe they're just thinking, this is going to create some speed bumps. So let's just not bother with it, which is a little bit of a shame, really, that people won't have access to it. Obviously, it is a lot of notice, but I think it's in-app purchases they will seize at the end of this month, so that's the 31st of October. So yeah, just it's kind of a shame that players there won't have it anymore. But yeah, I'm more just intrigued as to the why. Why did they come to this decision? Like, is it kind of what we're speculating, like just trying to get ahead of any potential regulation issues when they don't see it as giving them enough of a return, or is there a different reason for it?
So I can't remember how it monetizes but it's got to be loot box, right? That has to be the reason.
I think there are loot box elements. It has a few different things, like you can just buy like whatever their premium currency is to like get skins and stuff, and they have a subscription service. But I think there is a kind of gacha-esque loot box kind of element to it.
Yeah, because some countries now are just they're getting so strict with it. So some games where you'd think like, oh well, that's not really gambling elements. Some countries now are like even the most remote thing that indicates that it could be like gambling, they're kind of flagging it and regulating it more. So, whether, they see that these countries are two that are doing that, maybe it sort of comes down to that.
But I do think it's quite cool of them to, they're essentially going to force everyone to go free to play, but still let them play it for a year, knowing they're not going to make any money from those audiences. So I think that is pretty good of them to give that long before they shut it down. And then maybe if they're worried about any legal issues, once there's no monetization there, maybe they can kind of get around that of like, yes, it's in the game, but these people can't participate in that part of it, maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to skip that long, for sure. I've never seen that. It's usually quite a long time, to be fair. It's like a good few months, but 13 months, effectively.
That rounds it up for me for news.
Thanks very much for that, Paige. Aaron, what have you got?
Yeah, so kind of on a Pokemon-y note, Crafton has confirmed that it's making a mobile version of Palworld, which we've discussed a couple of times before. It might even have been last week we were talking about it, with its kind of potential unfortunate similarities to Pokemon that may cause issues. But for the moment, a bit of good news for them, I suppose. So yeah, Pocket Pair's Palworld, which came out in January on PC and Xbox, it is now getting a mobile version, which has been speculated for a little while. And then sometime in September, it kind of came up that Crafton may be developing the mobile game, and now they've confirmed it. So it sounds like it won't be a direct port because they've got a license agreement to, quote, faithfully reinterpret the game. So yeah, it sounds like it will be different in some way to the original, more kind of perhaps more streamlined for mobile, or they've not really explained, what will be different yet. But Crafton said that they aim to implement the original's main fun elements to fit the mobile environment. So it's an interesting one. The announcements kind of come at a funny time, just like a week or two after the Pokemon Company finally filed their lawsuit against Palworld. They started investigating it in late January, early February, and then finally done the proper lawsuit. But I guess this Crafton deal would have already been in the works and stuff for Pocket Pair. And yeah, the game also came out on PS5 a couple of days after Pokemon filed the lawsuit. So it's getting to be a pretty big multi-platform title for, obviously Pokemon is huge as well, but it's a pretty big project for them to be going up against at this point.
Love that they're just like, oh no, Nintendo are coming for us. I know. Let's release on mobile. It just seems like they're just completely unfazed. Like I said, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it's kind of like, oh no, they're coming for us, release on PS5. Oh no, they're coming for us again, mobile. And I'm glad that they kind of said that, oh, we're going to faithfully adapt it, because I would have half been expecting it's just like Power World Battle Royale or something along those lines. So, interesting, because obviously, that there is just the whole controversy of, it obviously looks similar to Pokemon with the creatures, but I have a feeling that, obviously it was huge on console, so I just have a feeling it could be good for them on mobile.
Yeah, I mean, it did huge numbers on Steam and Xbox, so I think it was the most played Game Pass game or something in January. And
Yeah, I
believe
wonder if that was a big help as well. Like nobody really had to take any risks by buying it because it was on Game Pass. So, would it have had such an impact if people were like, oh, do I want to buy this game? Like, I know Game Pass, you have to pay for it, but I have Game Pass and I always just think, oh, this game's free. Like, it's not free, I'm paying for it every month, but it's just like the illusion of it. So, yeah, I think that's part of the reason it got so big as well.
I think it did do well on Steam, at least for a time. The player count was pretty high. I can't remember if there was quite a big drop off. I think there might have been eventually.
I think it sold about 15 million units in a month.
Right, still all right. One of the interesting things, just reading this now, really is that PUBG Mobile was really developed by Tencent's Lightspeed studio. Obviously, Krafton, I think, played a part, and then they also did New State and Battlegrounds Mobile. But the big world famous one was developed in China. So yeah, I'm curious that Power World. Not to say it's not a talented team, sure it's a super talented team, but partnered with Krafton as opposed to, frankly, like a Tencent or an Ace.
Not to dive too deeply into speculation, but I wonder if because Pokemon Unite is developed with Tencent and Pokemon are now suing Pocket Pair, whether that would complicate them working with Tencent.
Interesting theory.
And then so also Hoyoverse has had another milestone this week with Zenless Zone Zero surpassing 150 million by App Magic estimates. And that's just on mobile to the Google Play Store and the App Store. So yeah, 150 million in gross revenue in just under 3 months, which obviously a big sum. A lot of people would be happy with that, but it's no Genshin Impact. It has to be said. So, well, both Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail achieved 150 million in 3 weeks, not 3 months. And Genshin had already made over 500 million when it was as old as Zenless Zone Zero is now. And again, that's just on mobile. So in that kind of context, suddenly their latest game doesn't look quite so successful. But at the same time, yeah, 150 million is pretty good going. And as we've kind of discussed before on the podcast, it seems like there has been some cannibalization between the different Hoyoverse games, particularly with them all being RPGs and similar kind of art style, and I guess they're targeting a similar audience. But Hoyoverse probably prefers that, as we've kind of discussed before. Like, I'm sure they'd rather people stay with their games rather than move to another developer's like shiny new RPG. Like, even if their newest title isn't, the next Genshin Impact, it's still making a lot of money and stopping people from maybe, going elsewhere.
Thanks very much for that, Aaron. And Paige, going to round us out with some big news from Epic this week.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on with Epic. Every week it's either Apple, Epic, Google. They're like these scandalous celebrities. They just can't stay out of the headlines. Um, but yeah, this week lots of Epic, and one of those stories being that they are changing their Epic Store royalty fee. So the percent is usually a 5% fee that they take. So they're reducing it to 3.5, but that's for games that go to the Epic Games Store on launch. So it's not kind of like after the fact. It's you release your game, you put it straight on the Epic Store, and you get this new shiny discounted rate, and that applies, across the board. So obviously that's, really nice appeal for creators. And good for them because, good for Epic because it means that, hopefully more people will want to release on their store. If you release but then want to kind of expand outside of it, your fee can just be reverted back to the 5%. So you do need to make sure that you remain on the Epic Store. This applies across all of the platforms, including mobile, kind of. So obviously there's a lot of Epic Apple stuff going on. So iOS has, that's not included at the moment, but for Android it is. One other thing to know is that I think it's, October 16th. So anyone who's eligible for this Epic First Run, as they're naming it, they'll get 100% of their net revenue from new titles on the Epic Game Store for 6 months. And that's even if they're not developed in Unreal Engine. But then, kind of to pivot it back around, after the 6 months, Epic will take 12% of future revenue. So I think I've got those numbers right. I have to check my notes. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of like that's a big deal. But yeah, basically, it looks like Epic are just trying to find ways to get more people to use, their platform as opposed to others. And there are a lot of people out there at the moment that are kind of looking to expand, beyond the traditional platforms that are the most popular ones. So yeah, I feel like it's quite a smart move. But yeah, interesting with the second part, like the having the 100% of the fee, and then sort of 6 months later it's 12%. I feel like I'm going to have to fact check that because reading it out loud sounds wrong, but am I missing something?
If I'm thinking about this right, I haven't had, because I've been here, I haven't had a chance to check yet. So the 5% royalty fee is the engine, is the Unreal Engine, and that's
Yeah.
based on gross revenue.
Yeah.
And so that's been reduced, and then the other 12% fee is just the store fee, right? So they
Yeah.
removed the store fee, I think is what they're saying, for 6
Yeah,
months.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think they already did that, didn't they? They announced it
Did
again
they?
like it's new. It's a very Apple thing. It's like here's something that's been invented 5 years ago, and then we'll talk about that
Yeah, I
forever.
don't know. I thought that was new, but the 5% down to 3.5, that's definitely new, and I get how that's like, that is a good incentive, and I guess it's kind of sneaky, but also good that they're kind of being like, you released it with us first, and like they have to stay because you would obviously get developers who just release there first and then move elsewhere, but I guess it's a good way of making sure people release with them but also just stick with them. Because yeah, there are just so many different stores out there now. Like, how do you make yourself stand out, even as someone like Epic with such a big name? There has to be those incentives.
Thanks very much for that, Paige. That brings us to the end of this week's PocketGamer.biz week in mobile games. I'm going to head off to the next event for Finnish Games Week. But as always, thank you very much, Paige, for joining the show.
Thank you for making time for us, even though you've got lots going on.
I feel awful that you said that. Thanks for making time for the team
No,
to be
no,
on the
okay,
show.
it sounds wrong, but I mean, I know when you're at events, like you're between things all the time. You're running back to hotels. So, like, I mean, in the sense of, it was good of you to come along.
Thank you.
I don't mean in the sense
Thanks.
of like, oh, he just forgets about us.
Just yeah, thank you. And Aaron, yeah, thanks very much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for finding the time for us.
Yeah. See you.
Poor us.
See you at the next event. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the new figures behind you on the shelves, Aaron.
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna have to make a thing of that now.
All right, yeah. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you all next week. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.